Awesome. Hello, everyone. This is Tukan from LeadSift here. Today, we have a stellar group of guests or panelists here joining me to be talking about two of the hottest buzzwords or trending topics in B2B marketing, ABM and intent data. So it's my privilege and honor to have these folks here. We have Kathy Mackey from Inverta, we have David Crane from Intensify, and we have Jamie Romero from Fortinet. Welcome, guys.
Welcome. Thank you.
Hi, Tukan.
Cool. Hey, so before we get into the discussion and about ABM and intent data, what will be great is if you can just give a quick introduction about yourself. So we can start with Kathy.
Right, Kathy Mackey. Let's see, I'm a long-term survivor of the tech industry. I have an IT background and probably got into this when Eloqua first came out and been dealing with marketing automation, demand gen, ABM for probably more than anyone here on the call or any of my lovely co-speakers here.
Awesome. Cool. David, do you want to go next?
I am David Crane. I'm VP of Marketing at Intensify. Before joining the Intensify team, beginning of the year, I was at Bombora for a while. And before that, I spent about 8 years at Integrate.
Awesome. Cool. And Jamie?
How you doing? Jamie Romero. I'm VP of Corporate Marketing over at Fortinet, responsible for driving brand and demand.
Awesome. Cool. Funny thing, when I was, I recorded a video promoting the webinar, and I said, we have a group of guests that are joining me that have been doing ABM and intent data before it was cool. So I'm really excited to have you guys here. So let's dive right into it. There's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of noise and chatter about intent data, and there's certainly some confusion around it, around the definition of it, what it does. So let's to start off. The question that I'd love to ask you guys is what is intent data? And if you're a B2B marketer, why do you care for it? So Kathy, if you wanna start off by answering that question.
I'm going to start with what it isn't, because I think when I speak to customers, everyone goes, oh, everyone feels they should have intent data. Like everyone's heard the buzzword. And then they're like, yeah, I want to know what people are searching on in Google. And I'm like, that's Google data. There's no way you're getting that. Why they're one of the most valued companies, along with a few others, is their proprietary data. The other thing I hear is, I want intent data because I don't know if my customers are on my competitor website. You're not going to get that either. In fact, if we could get those two things, I would be probably the most expensive consultant in the world. But you're not going to do one. But what intent data is think of it as data. Well, that's a Boston accent, data. You'll be getting data from, some people think of it as your internal, your first party data. It could be data you're gleaning from your web logs, your marketing automation system, application logs. That's your own intent data, like someone showing intent to be interested in your solution or product. The other, which I think we're going to talk about today, is the external. And it's information gleaned from, and every intent vendor does this different. Could be from B2B, publishers, from their website tags, could be from ones that take it from the ad exchange, so bidstream data. It could be from sites that basically has user registrations like G2 Crowd. So depending where you get it from, or you can get it from a bunch of them, it's that information, and you're looking at those topics, those keywords to say, hey, based on this, do we think they're interested in our solution? And the reason you want to do that is, right now, if you only have your first party data, you won't know about them until they come to your site. And this is the way to really get an idea of, is someone in market right now? And
that's awesome.
The data, how much data you get, you might be able to glean, yeah, I think they're in market. So
that's a great definition. Something funny I realized when you started off by saying what it isn't, it's not Google search data, and it's not telling them when someone is on a competitor's website. I think some of the participants left already. They're like, done. That's not there. So that's great. Thank you for that. I guess to continue with that discussion, I guess I'll switch it over to Jamie. Jamie, you have an interesting background. I guess you have sat on both sides of the table. In your previous job, you were at an intent data company selling intent. Now you're on the other side where you're running corporate marketing and probably leveraging intent. How do you see intent? Like, what would you say what is intent and why, as a B2B marketer, you care about it.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with, I agree everything that Kathy said. I mean, I don't know if I could add anything to that. But for me, intent data is really an aggregation of all of the data that you can collect on your prospects and use, and probably even more so data you can collect that you can make decisions around. Because you could get data that's essentially meaningless, but it's what's important is to be able to make decisions around it. And I guess the only thing that I could add to that would be, as Kathy was saying, a lot of the intent providers are getting ad exchange data and some of this third-party data, which is going to evolve in a pretty big way over the coming year, maybe 2 years, especially with going cookieless with Chrome and Google. So, I think a lot of companies need to start looking at investing in first-party data and really start thinking about the assets they have and putting plans into place right now to start understanding how to leverage that data, because you don't want to be stuck 18 months from now and all of a sudden a lot of your feeds and your pipes are basically turned off. Not that I expect it to be like a black and white turning off kind of thing, but it's definitely going to start slowly not performing as well as you would plan to.
That's an interesting angle, and I guess we'll talk a little bit about that, of the sources of intent later on. So moving on, David, I mean, you are, I guess, sort of the OG of intent data, given your background at at Integrate and Bombora, now at Intensify. When you think of intent data, what comes to mind? Like, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I can't correct anything Kathy or Jamie said. I agree with what they both said. I would just kind of add on to what Jamie was saying is, like, there's a misconception in the industry that there's just one type of intent data. You get it, you use it a certain way, and it couldn't be further from the truth. As Jamie was saying, people need to get first-party intent data through tracking their own website or, just tracking engagements. That is first-party data, but they need to add on extra layers of third-party intent data. And even there's not just one type of data. As Kathy said, there's exchange data. You have publisher site data. You have co-op data. And one isn't necessarily better than the other type. It's about they all provide their own piece of the puzzle. So bringing those all together is going to give you a more holistic view and actually give you a more sophisticated, nuanced view of your target audience as well. So I see people learning this gradually is that there's a lot more value bringing them all together. Of course, you need to use all these different data feeds and sources according to some set strategy. And that's where the challenge really comes in. People are buying data, but they don't know how to use it yet. And that's running into the actionability issue. But more and more, as people bringing consultants like Inverta to really set that plan out ahead of time, and then they invest in the data, and it works much better that way. So I think having that context and understand that intent data is no silver bullet, that it's just one very useful tool to add to that toolbox.
Okay, now as a segue to that question, and I think Kathy touched on it, so it is a very important tool, but it's not a silver bullet. But as a B2B marketer, what are some immediate things that you can think of when you have an intent data pipe feeding in? Whether it's, first party, third party, cookies, bid stream, public web, wherever it's coming from, the B2B marketer, what would be some of the use cases that you would think of when you get intent data? And I guess I'll start with Jamie. What would you say?
Yeah, so I think there's not a single answer to that, obviously.
Yeah.
I think there's a spectrum of how you're going to engage with that data. And part of that is going to be informed by how you're going to measure success and outcomes from that data and ROI. You can go on one end of the spectrum, which is, here's a list of prioritized accounts. I'm just going to hand this to the BDR team, and they're going to just call down. And that's a good thing, right? Because if you have 1 million accounts in your database and your intent feed is going to narrow that down to, 1,000 a week, that's better than just filtering and just randomly selecting from 1 million accounts. And then you could start going down the value chain in terms of informing emails, informing programmatic, informing what you're doing in any other marketing. And I think the key for me is really about creating a larger story and a larger program where intent informs multiple touch points to customers or prospects. It informs how you're going to personalize and personalize, not, you know, dear Jamie, it's personalized, hey, you know, you might be interested in a CRM or a CDP because, you know, all of a sudden CDP is starting to flag in your search or in your surging records from Bombora or your intent feed from whomever is checking out my ad exchange history. But so I think there's definitely a spectrum that you can use to implement. And I think part of it also is, you know, the type of company you work for can really impact how you implement that. I think the larger the company, the harder it is to create this utopia of B2B sales and marketing alignment that I used to preach all the time, in terms of, you know, when your sales org is several thousand salespeople, the idea of aligning, you know, fully from end to end is really difficult. And especially if you have longer sales cycles. So, you know, as a marketer, you start to think, pull back a little bit, say, where can I have the most impact? Where can I implement some intent to really start impacting, you know, earlier stages in the funnel or earlier stages in the marketing lifecycle before I start thinking about, all right, this is how, you know, intent should look like throughout my entire organization. So small steps, small wins, small ROI use cases. And then I don't know if we're going to talk about ROI later, but just to close that thought out, the idea of ROI is also really important in how you're looking at intent, because ROI, you know, if you're doing the whole BDR thing, it's probably pretty easy to measure ROI. If you establish a baseline and all of a sudden they get, you know, 3% better productivity and you just go down the chain that way and you can get a good clear ROI number. But I mean, I believe that the value of intent extends beyond that. But measuring ROI across, you know, an incremental 2% increase on click-through rates, 3% increase on conversion rates in your direct mail, and so on and so forth, you know, it has a very clear, definitive impact. But you've got to be a pretty sophisticated marketing org to measure that.
No, that's a great question. To follow up, I guess this is a question for Kathy or David. Talking about ROI, one of the things when talking to marketers, one question that come in is, well, how soon? Well, everyone wants an ROI from any kind of program that they're using. One question that we hear is, how soon can I expect to get an ROI? Whatever it is, it's 100% ROI, 2% improvement, whatever. What do you guys think? What is a reasonable expectation when someone is implementing an intent solution?
David, do you want to take that first? Or
It's just, it really depends organization.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on, you know, what they're tracking, what their goals are. Some organizations are simply looking at, you know, conversions to marketing qualified leads. In that case, you're going to find ROI a lot quicker than if your goals are, you know, pipeline creation, because that's going to take longer to really track. So it's really hard to say when you expect ROI. I mean, you can also just look at time savings too, because you're allocating resources to the right targets. It really depends on what you're tracking and how you're actually defining ROI for your specific organization. So it's kind of hard for me in my perspective to say you should see ROI within 1 quarter. I think for a lot of organizations, specifically the smaller the organizations, probably more likely you'll see ROI increases, but there's so many variables out there. I think it's kind of hard to answer that one. What do you think, Kathy?
Well, I think to Jamie's point, I liked, as much as it's not, one use case was the BDRs, and I think that's actually one of the easiest ones if you're going to do a quote ROI. Because I have and I'll go over an example I have, but like I have a client now, and we're looking just using it to get better leads on content syndication. But they have it really takes 3 to 6 months for a content syndication lead to convert. So I mean, our project's only 3 months, and I'm already like, well, I won't be around when you see the ROI. Well, like, what do we need to do to sort of keep that going? And so, but the BDR one, because BDRs, like, they just call all day long. Like you can almost easily set up the test there to say, here are accounts that don't have any, here are accounts that do. And just like, what's your connect rate on them? You know, were you ever in a meeting? It's an easy one if you're trying to show like what I would call a quick win. And they're usually just like, you can tell them, hey, these might have a better chance. Oh, okay. Well, they're desperate for anything. Like you said, Jamie, they have 10,000 accounts. Who do I call first? So as a way to just help prioritize, it's a good option. Same thing if you're going to bring leads in from the top and you're saying which should go in certain nurtures. I mean, an easy way, you're not going to get an ROI, but at least it's a way to funnel things as a first level of prioritization.
Yeah. And I'll just add one more point to that. When I was at MRP, and this was something that we repeated over and over with multiple clients, where, how do you measure ROI when you consistently see, improvements in, 50% improvement in a click-through rate on a programmatic ad, a consistent increase in email performance, consistent increase in direct mail performance. And it's like, and it wasn't just a one-off, like consistently you're seeing that improvement. So that's why I think if you are a sophisticated marketing org and you can measure the effect and the impact of that 1 or 2% increase, then it's a no-brainer. But I think there's almost a leap of faith you have to make for a little while, just to see if it works.
Just getting baselines.
Hey, Jamie, I
was just going to say, just getting baselines to try to do that is hard. So it tells you right there, you get me a baseline, we're not going to be able to show ROI.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to ask Jamie. It's like, how often do you take baselines before you implement any new initiative, whether it's tech or a new strategy? I mean, how often do most companies make sure they have a baseline and be able to measure against that the next quarter? Is that something you do regularly, Jamie?
Yeah, so always, and I'll say either, I shouldn't say always, either you have the baseline, so you either have historical data you can look at too, or do a control. And we did a lot of control tests. So it was like, here's accounts that we're not seeing any intent data for, or here's accounts that we're not even going to put into the system. They may have intent, they may not, we don't know. There was always a control or historical data that we would always or do always look at to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Awesome. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the norm, though. I think more marketing organizations need to do that, but I don't think that's normal. But Kathy, what have you seen from the consultancy perspective?
I mean, it's not, part of it is, especially now, everyone is like, just get something in market. It's like, we'll just get it in market, And I think it's always this, just get something out the door now. And I can't tell you everything we're ever going to. We just need a quick win. A quick means just get it out there, which unfortunately, the discipline, Jamie, you've talked about, where you can really say, and then they all know, did this work? I don't know, what was your baseline before?
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of saying, let's just get this out 100 times, but
So I think you have to decide, where do you put the discipline in to say, this is what I really want to do. And it typically has to be a big enough investment. If you want to say, yes, I want to try to measure this, because we're either going to buy this at the end or get 3 feeds or do whatever, But otherwise,
Talking about different forms of buying intent, there's a classic example of buying intent. If you have seen any, one of the audience question was, is there a provider that aggregates all of the mentioned intent data sources into one affordable offering instead of buying it individually? I think there might be someone in the guest that might answer that. So do you want to answer that, David?
I think Mark or Mike registered as a different name.
No, it's from a real person. I know this person. So, David,
that's exactly what Intensify what we're doing. That's the solution that we built and we're continuing to build out. Is we believe that there's, as I alluded to earlier, that there's a lot of value from all these different intent sources and types of intent data. Using them each in a vacuum, that's not helping anything. Bring them all together and helping marketers really digest all that data quickly in a meaningful way, and then helping them activate that data through kind of turnkey solutions. That's overcoming that largest challenge that marketers have in instant data, which is actionability. That's why I call it intent activation software. But that's exactly what we're in market to provide it in Intensify.
Amazing. So that's
I wouldn't have plugged that unless you brought it up. But.
Hey, that was a genuine question. It was not scripted.
Did someone ask, is there a company that can help us activate the data they get from Intensify?
We haven't seen that. That's for the next half. All right. Okay. So this is great, and I'll connect you, David, with Francis. Cool.
Great.
So, there's someone saying us. Okay. This is good. I love it. There's a lot of engagement. So moving on. So those were some great examples of what intent is, misconception, what it can do, the ROI expectations, and the use cases. Now the topic of the webinar is intent and how it applies to ABM. So I guess the follow up there is, in your experience, I mean, every big enterprise company that we talk to is doing some form of account-based marketing or account-based sales, disguised as account-based marketing. Is how have you seen intent data being used in an ABM program? I guess we can start with Jamie.
Yeah, so I guess the way I'll answer that is, some of the lessons that I've learned over the years, and the first one always started with scale. And when I first started doing intent programs, ABM programs, it was like, here's 10,000 accounts or 1,000 accounts, and we've got 1,000 different messages, and the graphic designer had to put 1,000 different creatives together, and we started doing all of these things, and it was just weeks and weeks of work. And then when you actually looked at all the outcomes, it was pretty much no different than the control. So it really didn't have that much of an impact. And in part, like some of the mistakes I made early on was thinking about ABM in the context of just let's get personalized and very specific messages out to accounts from a marketing point of view. And I think, the lesson that I had learned back then when I was implementing ABM programs is really and I could be wrong here, but it really has to be a much smaller set of accounts, manageable. And that number depends. If you have a 40-person marketing team with a 5,000-person sales team and they're all doing ABM, then you've got a 5,000 account list, and that's great. If you've got 10 salespeople with 2 marketers, then you're probably at 20. But the idea is it really boils down to that sales and marketing alignment and understanding, via a person calling into an account and understanding what's going on at that account. And a lot of my philosophy around this stuff was informed by the book, the Challenger Customer, and really spoke about personas and the influencers in a sale and all that stuff. So really understanding those things. And I think in part ABM is also having a platform to capture that insight and understanding what those things are, and then marketing being able to act on that and support sales. And it's not just about writing a white paper. It's really, understanding what the essence of an account challenges and supporting a sales rep in that regard.
That's great. I guess the question, this is David and then Kathy, is in the same line. In an ABM program, there's 2 big components. One is the account selection piece, and then there is account activation. You do something with these accounts that you've selected. In the account activation, there's obviously a piece of prioritization. Which one of these accounts do I go after? Where have you seen intent play? Where does intent play a role? Is it more on the selection of the accounts that you should go after, or is it more around prioritizing these accounts and then taking intent to prioritize them and then also personalize the outreach or things like that? What have you guys seen?
I think it's both. Whether you weigh one more than the other really depends on your own organization, your product offering. But there's numerous ways to use it throughout the funnel. Obviously, the top ones that people know about is through account prioritization and lead scoring, as Jamie referred to, and then also just digital, programmatic advertising as well. But most other use cases for ABM that marketers are less aware of are things like content marketing, identifying prospective buyer concerns. So you could know what piece of content, or if you have gaps in your content, you need to create new content. Identifying which accounts are actually progressing through the funnel. So once again, which type of messaging to use for them, selecting right nurture tracks, also arming BDRs, the right content they should use in their outreach to those prioritized accounts. Then also content syndication. Once you know what accounts you're prioritizing, you could make sure that the publishers you're going through are only actually generating leads from those accounts. That way, there's more likelihood that they're going to convert. So you're not wasting your media budget, but also just your follow-up of efforts on accounts that aren't actually identified identify their content consumption. And then even post-sales, because we know that customer marketing is such a big part of ABM as well. And a lot of marketers kind of don't think about this as much as, you can use intent data to identify which accounts that you currently have are most likely to churn. If they're researching a brand's competitor offerings, that's indicative that they may be looking to leave. So you could actually rectify those issues before it's too late. Or if there's accounts that you may be looking to expand on, you can see if they're researching product offerings that you may offer, but they may not be aware of you have the solution, so that you can actually get your team to really start focusing resources to expand those accounts in that way as well, which is, pretty key to ABM success as well.
Kathy, anything to add to that?
So, I'm not going to disagree completely, but I think I have a different definition of ABM. So I think what David said makes sense if you're saying ABM is just my entire account list, like it's demand gen. So I think, no offense, David, but I think ABM has become a meaningless term these days. I mean, people just say, I'm going to run ads to these accounts. I'm like, oh, I'm running an ABM program. To me, what separates your ABM program is you're really being thoughtful about the accounts that are in it. And you should be the accounts with the most potential. Just because they show up with intent data doesn't mean they have the most, potential. So if you're going to put extra time, resources, budget, money into it, you want to make sure these are accounts that are worth pursuing and not just who happens to be searching or consuming content around the topic. So I think having, whether it's propensity modeling, it's tribal knowledge from your own accounts, it's what do they already own, like being thoughtful about your account selection, which is different than them prioritizing. Now with that account group, I said using intent then to say, hey, who's in market right now, I think makes sense. And then I agree with everything David's saying about how we can use it in different scenarios. But I think picking the accounts, I would not, unless you're just doing demand gen, then yeah, hey, I've got 50,000 accounts who happens to be in market, but I don't think you're selecting, you're just prioritizing. Select is a very thoughtful process that I don't think people put enough time into.
I agree 100%, Kathy. I think I tend to just assume people are layering intent over fit data and making sure that they're, they already have their ICP as well based on technographic information and the firmographic information. But you're right, if they don't have that, then they're just using simple intent. It's not going to be nearly as powerful, and it's not ABM.
Let me ask.
I just want to add, I want to reinforce something Kathy said and make sure that if anybody has one takeaway from here, it's like, don't use intent to select your accounts. Select your accounts based on business benefit, and then use intent to prioritize them. I think that's a great takeaway for this.
I see a mini clip of this surfacing on LinkedIn next week. One tactical question here is, let's say you have an ABM list, and let's say you see one of these accounts is showing intent through whatever signals, whether it's first party data or third party sources. And let's say you get that account. Let's go with, let's say that account is Dell. You found out Dell is showing intent, but Dell is not one of the leads in your account, but it's part of the target account list because it's a good fit and everything. How would you action that data? Because can you nurture them through your marketing automation system with content, or would you run ads first, at the same time give it to BDRs? And it's just to call our book meeting to get them to opt in. Tactically speaking, how would you execute on that information?
I guess I could just jump in there if you want me to start.
Yeah, go for it.
So, there's a certain amount of assumptions we'll make, I guess, in terms of the data that we have access to here. But, I could say in programs that I've built in the past, I'll assume that I have a consent to email this person. If we don't, I've put quite a bit of effort in the past to get consent from companies that we're not marketing to proactively. I've always had a separate initiative to get consent. So we'll just assume we have consent. But, a lot of this is really about being thoughtful about how you build your tech stack and the tools that you're selecting that work together. So if you have, let's say Dell starts demonstrating some elevated activity through, Bombora or through Success or MRP or Prolitics or Intensify or whichever intent provider you're using, you know, that's a trigger for the various activities that can happen. And obviously, you know, one of the easiest things a lot of these ABM vendors do is you didn't run your programmatic advertising, and you can start there. The one thing that has evolved over the last few years with programmatic that I would say is a requirement for anybody really doing intent was, you know, use smart programmatic. You know, start using cookie data to filter out, you know, the targets, so that way you're not wasting impressions on just a broad range of people at a particular IP address. And even more so now with work from home, you'll want to start thinking about, you know, the accounts that have the vendors that have really strong identity graphs who can help you identify device IDs and potential targets at accounts, either using geolocation or using some other way to identify a person that appends to their cookie and device, so you are actually targeting the user. So if programmatic's important for you, definitely pay a lot of attention there and find the right vendor who can have access to all of the right people, because I think IP address is not the most efficient, especially now. And then, you know, after you've run programmatic for a week or two, I would then start triggering a few emails to some of the key contacts. Sometimes it's, hey, you know, like, you know, if you're searching for cybersecurity software, then I, you know, start with something specific and I start shooting over some white papers, potentially trigger an email. That's one of those, you know, as Kathy identifies, a high value account that's now starting to be surging and prioritizing. Then you can start executing direct mailers after an email, because if they respond from the email, then you can save the money from the direct mail. If they don't respond to email, then you can send the direct mail. And then ultimately, you know, depending on the activity, if they visit your website, they get you to email, they've converted on direct mail, then you can start funneling them over to your BDR team. So it's really about being thoughtful and mapping out that touch process. Once you have that touch process mapped out, you've executed a few times, you've got some baselines, then you can start playing with the order of things. You can start, you know, really changing, you know, what the initial signal was versus what you're actually marketing. You can start changing some of that to see if there's a correlation between what the signals are and what they're actually interested in. Because, you know, the way I see it is, you know, if they're surging for a specific topic, you know, let's just, I don't even know what the vendors anymore use for a priority engine, but, you know, let's say it's 100 out of 100 for some topic. The next topic down could be 98 out of 100, but they're only going to show up on that one list. So, you know, there's definitely a tolerance there that you can play with in terms of what you're marketing against.
That's a great tactical
One
answer.
thing,
Anyone want to add? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I mean, that was a great answer. One thing we're working on these assumptions is that you already have some contact info from that account from Dell, which is likely. But you also have to keep in mind that the contacts you do have may not be part of that buying committee that's actually looking at your product too. So you actually have to go out and try and get contacts from that buying committee. A good way of doing that is third-party lead gen or content syndication, targeting those specific companies. That way, if they do engage with branded content, that content syndication, that's an extra layer of intent. They download it, plus you have their contact info now. There's a good chance they're on that buying committee, so you could follow up with them rather than just engaging people who may not be on the committee but are at that account. And we all know with enterprise like Dell, there's buying committees located all across the globe. So you want to make sure that you can localize where that intent's coming from too. You may find that buying committee is based in Austin or New York, and so you want to focus your efforts on those regions through all the tactics that Jamie talked about, but also getting the contact information through content syndication rather than just pulling names off of a list.
Yeah. Agreed. And Kathy, would you advise anything else to your clients in this case if Dell shows up as an account showing intent?
I think they both cover things. The only thing I've done is typically there's accounts on your target account list. And then there's about 25% that come in through other things. What I find is having reps dedicated to that other stuff that comes in and making sure you have your reps dedicated to your target account list, because otherwise they fall in that black hole. And having good processes or choreographed orchestration for what happens when they come in here versus what happens when they come in there. But Jamie and Dave, what you outlined, you know, what tactics you want to do and when and how.
Yeah. That's right. Pretty straightforward.
That's great. So I guess the final item that we had was, now we talked about what is intent, what it's not, ABM, how to use it. That's great. Now let's talk about some real data. So I guess, I know David and Kathy, you guys work pretty closely together with clients. is if you can share some examples of a campaign that you have run for a client, an ABM campaign with intent, ideally. If you want to share some results, some tactics around that, that'll be great. And we'll go to Jamie next.
Oh.
So first we can start with, we can start with David and Kathy.
You want me to start, David?
Sure.
Well, I can get into some of the things, but one of the things I tell clients to do is pick a use case to start. Because what I find is people don't necessarily proactively get intent data. It comes as an extra bonus through some software they already get. Or I got these leads and I'm getting intent data. I mean, a lot of my clients are like, I'm getting it. What do I do with it? I can't tell how many people get intent data and it's just sitting there. Like they all know they should be doing something with it. And so what I found is pick a use case to start and make it manual to start. So like right now, we've picked one around some content syndication is one, and we've done one recently with BDRs. Pick it, pass everything manually, get some baselines, and really say, you know, are we seeing progress? What's really going on? Do we need to change keywords around? And I really get a team together. Everyone has a responsibility. So we walk this through step by step, analyze results. And if some things don't work, like David said, fail fast, pick another one, go. And then if it works, then say, how do I start to automate this one? But keep the same use case. What I find is, I want to do one, then I'm going to do another, and can we get it to the BDRs, and can we give it to our sales reps? Sales reps have no idea what to do with intent data to send it over. They're like, well, there's no person. And what am I supposed to do? Call them up and say, you interested in, like, who do I call? So unless you get all this structure in place, what are you going to do with it? It comes in, are we seeing results? Where does it go? How do we ingest it? What do we even do? Like if there's, you know, you can give people 100 topics. Well, what if 100 companies come back all on, 10 different topics? Like, what are you going to do for that follow-up? Are we going to just pick one of these topics now to build out a nurture track? So I think getting a very narrow use case to build that muscle. Otherwise, they get frustrated and then nothing happens with it. And they're just like, well, and they're on to the next shiny object.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David, is there any example of a campaign that you have run that you can share?
I can't share the name of the
yeah,
no,
go ahead.
Just a number.
I think we've worked. Go ahead. You go through it.
Yeah, so some of them we're seeing 132% increase in BDR email open rates, 46% increase in click-through rates, conversion rates to sales qualified leads, jump of like a quarter over quarter of about ranging anywhere between 40% and 70%. Those conversion rates go way up, and just the velocity through the pipeline going up too. I'm kind of going through various examples here. Pipeline, yeah. The one thing I want to stress that Kathy was referring to was that I think there's so many use cases for instant data, it could be a little overwhelming for a lot of teams. They'll get the data and they're like, okay, I could do this with this, I could do this with this. Which people do I need to bring into to planning? Which technology should I involve? All that could get very broad. Pretty soon you're involving a lot of different teams, a lot of individuals, and it could get really cumbersome to actually execute that strategy. That's why it's so important to focus on one use case, one pilot program. But it's important that you get sales buy-in. That's a big challenge. The actionability is huge for those reasons, but getting sales buy-in because they need to help you pick the topics and keywords to actually monitor as well. I mean, if B2B, if the marketing team selects all the topics, that's great, but there's often a big chasm between what marketing thinks the most relevant topics and points to address are compared to what sales thinks that they should address. So if sales isn't along for the journey to help selecting those topics and keywords at the beginning, there's not going to be a good handoff. So that messaging is going to get corrupted as soon as it goes over to the sales team, and that's really going to undermine the overall result.
One question, if I may ask, David, you mentioned one of the use cases was BDR engagement for this particular client going up 136%. So I guess they're measuring against the baseline. Do you know what time period they observed that? How long it took them?
I think they it changed every quarter, kept going up as they got better with it. But I think the first quarter, Kathy, would you say that we saw, it was one quarter that we saw that first measurement?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Jamie, any examples that you can share?
I mean, I guess the way I agree with everything everyone's been saying. It's hard to give an example that's that I'm allowed to share. But what I can say is, it's important to define how you're measuring success, especially if you have a longer sales cycle. And in some of the cases where I have been able to demonstrate success, or I should say we as a team, because it wasn't just me, has been really looking at the overall impact to the org. So, very specifically, I remember one of our old customers where, we were doing 100,000 accounts, and the measurement of success was really around the ultimate long-term measure was pipeline generation. But because it took months to generate, like really incrementally, what we were looking at was, doing those split tests to show that we were getting 20, 30, 40% increases in direct mail response rates. And there was a direct correlation between direct mail response rates and pipeline. So while the revenue wasn't necessarily attributed to the intent, that if your baseline was the 10% conversion rate and also you're doing 20%, you can assume that half of that, or you can infer half of that is as a result of the changes that you've made to the overall program. So like I was saying earlier, pretty much every time we've run this and done this kind of cohort analysis, we were seeing markedly improved response rates on pretty much every single channel across the board. There wasn't a single channel that didn't. Some went up by 2 or 3%, single digits, but some went up, a lot went up by double and even triple digits.
That's great.
But you have to look for it. You're not going to know unless you're actually, set a plan to actually measure that impact.
One thing that, if I may ask this, we noticed this. So let's go with the example of Dell. So let's say Dell is an account that is in your pipeline, and you have 3 contacts that you have from there, but that you have accumulated through ads or events or something. But now all of a sudden you see intent signal on Dell for a specific topic like cybersecurity, and you then go ahead and run more paid or get your BDRs to follow up with those contacts within Dell, and they do book a meeting and create an opportunity and close a deal. From an attribution perspective, when you run a report, you will not see that there was an intent signal on Dell that created this account. This account was already created. These contacts were already created. Is that a problem with intent where they go, well, I don't see intent influencing revenue because these leads were already there from a year ago? Is that a problem that you see, Jamie?
Yeah, so obviously marketing attribution is a problem since I think it was 20 BC when we started marketing stuff. But it's funny you say that, because we've actually done analysis in the past where a lot of the intent providers will do look back reports, and we've done analysis where we actually have gotten the close date and mapped back the actual start of intent activity, like meaningful intent activity. And I don't want to say the wrong number because I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was a high percentage where there was a direct correlation between this predictive intent activity that happened, 3 to 4 months out from a closed one, that we started using as a signal to say, all right, well, 3 to 4 months early, we're starting to see this activity. And that's pointing to a closed one. And we also saw that, and I'm thinking now, there's another client we had where we used the intent on the renewals. And we saw specific spikes in activity happen a month before renewals. Now, in this case, it didn't work out, admittedly, because the renewal conversation had to happen 6 months out, not 1 month out. But it was interesting nonetheless to see this spike in activity pretty much every single time on a renewal. We didn't catch it early enough, but having that signal means that it's something there. And if you can start extrapolating even further out and maybe get more signals out when it is meaningful, that's just a case where you have to convince leadership or convince yourself to say, you know what, there is something there, and we're going to put in the time to figure it out. This is going to be a cost. For example, I have money in my budget right now that's I call innovation money, that I don't need ROI. I don't need anything. I just want to spend it because I want to see if something's going to work.
That's a signal of intent right there.
Right. So, you know, if you see that like glimmer of hope, you know, jump on it and see if you can turn that into something. But so that's the best I can share on hard examples.
Amazing.
You brought
Go
up
ahead.
a point that I don't want to be lost on anyone listening. Doing that historical analysis. And it's really hard to get companies to commit to that because they always think, well, this intent data, they're going to buy like in a week or two. It's like, no, we see a big surge 9 months out, depending on your solution. So your past wins and going back and doing that historical look back, I think is critical for you to get the most impact out of your intent data.
Yeah. But you know, the issue I find with almost all of these companies is, you know, they're coming out with all these insights and things, but they don't, it's very, very, very hard to operationalize that stuff. So like we'll get a PowerPoint spreadsheet or a PowerPoint presentation that's like, hey, here's this cool insight we found. And like I said, 9 months early, you're getting all this stuff. And it's like, cool. Like, how do I turn that into something meaningful and useful within the marketing org? And I think that's the big gap we're seeing right now across all the intent providers, all the ABM platform stuff. It's like all this great insight, and there's some things you can action on, but the really cool stuff and the real meaningful stuff that we all talk about, and you know, like I hear on pitches all the time, it's like there's just this gap there on really activating that data and just like that last mile, and nobody seems to have figured it out yet.
David's smiling. I see.
Yeah, well, what we're working on right now, we have a few solutions. We're building them out right now, but that's exactly what we came into business for. Because as you probably saw that Topo survey that came out a few months ago, 67% B2B marketing leaders who were surveyed say the actionability is the number one challenge they have with intent data. And the number two one was like 22 points less than that. So making sure you're able to act on that intent data is definitely the biggest challenge by far. And we're building solutions for it right now, but it's not easy. It's definitely something marketers need to work on.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess that was all for our discussions. I guess we'll just go to the audience. There's still quite a few people still in the audience. If you have any questions, please feel free to, you know, post them in here while we have these people for a few more minutes, and we can answer that. There was someone during discussion, I missed that. Someone said that they are building a tool to merge all those three like different kinds of intent into one platform, and it was not Intensify. So I don't know who that was, but
we have a new competitor.
You do. So this is a competitive intelligence part for you. Any questions from anyone? I guess. Okay. Let's see. I guess not. I guess we answered all the questions they had. And oops. Okay, there's a question. Sorry. I'll pull it up. The interface is not there. Okay. So the question is from Rishabh. Hey, what do you think about a platform that has intent ABM in it? I'm not sure I get that. So I guess.
I think I get it.
Okay, go for it, Kathy.
A lot of the platforms now will get a feed from either their own or another vendor. And so, and that's why I said, I do a lot of folks that say, well, I'm just getting it now. What do I do with it? So part of as you get it in, a lot of it's not timestamped. So you don't know if it's 3 months old, 6 months old, but you've got to start to, what I have to find is pull it out of that system and put it somewhere and start seeing a pattern over time, like are things going up or down. So when you just get it through another system, it's usually just a bunch of the keywords. And each week, you know, they upload new ones. So what I found to make that actionable, I've got to export it out and then put it in something so I can start to see, well, is that just always like a company's activity, or I see something go up or down, and start to categorize it. But that's, you can get it now through a lot of platforms.
Got it.
what do you do with it?
Okay, cool. Yes, that's all the time we have. Oh, no, sorry, there's one more question. Like an IABM program, which allows inbound data as well as first party. I'm talking about the Buying Collective site. So, basically an ABM product that also includes intent from first party and third party in one platform.
I mean, potentially could be referring to CDP style.
Possible. That's exactly it. Yeah, I think it's probably a CDP.
I think I know what they're talking about. I mean, there's 1 or 2 platforms that have that right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you have your first party data. You know when they're on the website, you know what's happening on Marketo, and this just gives you another layer. So yeah, it's helpful. You have your internal intent data, your website activity, your Marketo data, and this is just showing you. But again, it's typically just a feed of keywords. So yes, it can be used to say, well, if you're seeing a lot of activity with this account, you may be in market also. So it's, to me, it's just another data point.
Yeah.
But it's typically just a feed of, here are the words we've seen, or here are the topics. You put the topics in, and that shows you when they're seeing them at those accounts. But you typically don't get any location data. You don't get a timestamp with it. And it's not bad. It's just more general. So if it's a big company, it's like, well, was this from GE California? It's a big company. And so a lot of times when it's IP-based without location, it can be hard to action. But again, it's one more data point that if you're trying to prioritize accounts with reps, that one's going to go higher than someone that has no intent data.
And I know you're right. I think I spoke to LeadSift. They're a CDP, and they actually ingest some of that. So very good. Awesome. Well, thank you again, everyone. Thanks for the chat. It was enlightening. This was really, really good. And I hope the audience got value. This is being recorded. So after this, I'll record it, we'll edit it and send it over to all the attendees to listen later on. And I'll follow up with all the guests later. Again, thank you very much and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.